A lot of people know that J.R.R. Tolkien served in the Great War, and that his time as a soldier influenced The Lord of the Rings. What a lot of people don't know, however, is what Tolkien actually did, what he saw with his own eyes in the front lines of the First World War, and most importantly, the story of his survival. The story of Tolkien's military service actually began before World War I ever started in that dreadful July of 1914. Already while attending King Edward's School, he had joined the school's cadet corps in 1907 at the age of 15. By his final academic year in 1911, he had reached the rank of corporal, and in this photograph we can see the 1907 inspection conducted by the Field Marshal Earl Roberts. Through this experience, Tolkien would learn how to use a rifle, and he served as one of the honor guard stationed in London for the coronation of George V. Most of these boys would not survive the coming war. In 1911, Tolkien began his studies at Oxford, and by the breakout of hostilities in 1914, he was still pursuing his degree. Nonetheless, already from November of 1911, the South African-born Tolkien had joined King Edward's Horse, a cavalry regiment composed of part-time volunteer soldiers of colonial origins. During this time, 19-year-old Tolkien would rent a horse during his training sessions, and the conditions at the regiment were reportedly quite difficult. He resigned in 1913 and immediately felt immense pressure to join the British Army when World War I finally commenced the next year. Despite the pressure from his peers and his extended family, Tolkien decided to finish his degree first before enlisting for the war. In preparation, however, he joined the Oxford University Officers Training Corps, and following the end of his final exams in June of 1915, Tolkien finally applied for an officer's commission in the British Army. He officially joined in the next month as a second lieutenant of the 13th Battalion, Lancashire Fusiliers, where he spent the rest of 1915 in training. In March of 1916, he finally married his beloved Edith, enjoyed a short honeymoon with his wife, and used the next 3 months gaining additional certifications for war. Namely, he learned how to transmit and receive Morse code with a buzzer, flags, and lamps. June 6th of 1916, Tolkien had already reached France and was put in the 74th Infantry Brigade of the 25th Division of the Fusiliers. On the 7th of July 1916, Tolkien's battalion finally entered the Battle of the Somme, perhaps the bloodiest engagement of the entire war. There, Tolkien and the 11th Lancashire Fusiliers would spend the next 4 months rotating between active frontline combat and behind-line training and fortifications. The experience was ruthless, and the casualties were immeasurable. Tolkien's job in this time, as a signals officer, was to take care of his battalion's communications with headquarters. This would entail laying physical telephone cables in the open field, usually under artillery fire or active enemy attacks. The professor recorded little there, opting instead to write letters to his wife and a few poems. In October of the same year, Tolkien and his battalion attacked a German defensive position, captured the trenches, but suffered immense casualties in the process. 158 in a single day to be exact, which accounted for over 10% of all the men. For their heroism and sacrifice, they were relieved and congratulated personally by General Hubert Gough and Field Marshal Douglas Haig. Suddenly, however, within a few days from the attack, Tolkien experienced a strong fever and reported sick. He was diagnosed with trench fever, and in November he was ultimately sent back to England on the medical ship SS Asturias. Trench fever was an infectious disease transmitted from lice, which plagued a massive portion of all soldiers serving in the conflict, regardless of sign. He was examined extensively by the Army Medical Board and remained completely unfit for service and largely bedridden until March of 1917. During his time recovering from the disease, Tolkien would write his very first stories of what would eventually become Middle-earth, namely the Fall of Gondolin. In April, he was sent to the Fusiliers' 3rd Battalion, where he largely oversaw administrative duties, and saw the birth of his first child, John, in November of 1917. By April of 1918, Tolkien was finally evaluated to be fit for general service and was sent for retraining in order to rejoin the war effort. However, by June he was already sick again, suffering from a serious case of gastritis and losing over 10 kilos. Thus, the army effectively released him from his duties and permitted him to rejoin civilian life, which he did by working for the Oxford English Dictionary by January of 1919. Although, notably, he remained an army officer. Therefore, in June, he was examined again and deemed fit for service in England, which led to nothing on account of the Treaty of Versailles at the very end of that month. Finally, in July of 1919, Tolkien had officially been discharged from the British Army. In his misfortune due to his illnesses, Tolkien was able to exit the battlefield after over 3 months of active service. Those 3 months were hell on earth. In his diary, he would only write when he slept, when he had the privilege of hearing mass through the noise of battle, and when he participated in active combat. He fought at La Boisselle, Ovillers, Thiepval, and Beaumont-Hamel. Most of his school friends, most of his university friends, were dead. From his club at King Edward's School, the TCBS, few survived. His close friend Robert Gilson died on the very first day of the Somme, alongside another 19,000 British soldiers. Jeffrey Smith was hit by a shell a few months later in the same battle. Tolkien rarely spoke about his true experiences of the conflict. Few of those men ever did. When asked about the inspiration of The Lord of the Rings, the professor remained vague. He hated allegory, and he avoided stating that any one experience from his life influenced his work directly. His friend Jeffrey, as he was still in bed recovering from his shell injuries, wrote to Tolkien, "My chief consolation is that if I am scuppered tonight, there will still be left a member of our school group to voice what I dreamed and what we all agreed upon. For the death of one of its members cannot, I am determined, dissolve the group. Death can make us loathsome and helpless as individuals, but it cannot put an end to the immortal four. May God bless you, my dear John Ronald, and may you say things I have tried to say long after I am not there to say them, if such be my lot. Yours ever, GPS." He died the very next day. Of the TCBS founding four, only Tolkien and Christopher Wiseman survived, and it is after this dear friend that Tolkien's son Christopher Tolkien was named after. They remained friends for the rest of their lives, and it was in fact a plan to visit him made in late August of 1973 one of the very last things that Tolkien ever intended to do before his death. Unfortunately, he became ill and was never able to make the visit. A massive thank you to my channel members, and thank you very much for watching.